A Werewolf Shifter romance audiobook written by Jane. Prologue. The whisper had always been there, a cold promise woven into her very being. You are destined to die alone. It wasn't a curse spoken by a witch in a dark alley, but a chilling truth that settled deep in Elara's bones, a truth she felt with every beat of her lonely heart. You know that feeling, right? That deep, unshakable certainty about something awful, even if you can't explain why. For Elara, it was her very existence. She lived in shadows, a ghost in a world teeming with life. Her heightened empathy, a gift that felt more like a cruel joke, meant she could feel the laughter of strangers, the quiet comfort of a mother's touch on her child, the sharp sting of betrayal from a lover. Because of that, every emotion that wasn't hers became a painful echo, a constant reminder of the connections she dared not forge. She pulled away from anyone who got too close, instinctively, like a hand recoiling from fire. She just knew they'd meet a tragic end, leaving her heartbroken, leaving her utterly isolated. It was a self-imposed prison, built from fear and a desperate, misguided love. No matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the prophecy was a heavy cloak she wore, its weight pressing down on her every decision. She navigated the hidden corners of human society, a discreet existence, always aware of the other world lurking just beneath the surface, the powerful, secretive werewolf packs that ruled in the shadows. She'd heard the whispers, seen the fleeting blurs of impossible speed, felt the raw, untamed power that sometimes bled into the human world. She kept her distance because her prophecy wasn't just about her. It was about protecting those she might, against her will, come to care for. In fact, her life was a series of temporary havens, each one abandoned before the threads of connection could truly bind her. She was a master of disappearing, leaving no trace, no lingering scent of her presence. Even so, the ache for connection was a constant, dull throb beneath her ribs. She longed for a touch, a laugh shared, a quiet moment of belonging. But the prophecy was a wall, tall and unyielding, built brick by brick with every moment of forced solitude. What's worse, she often wondered if this constant avoidance was her true death, a slow, emotional fading long before her body gave out. Yet deep down, a tiny, defiant spark flickered. Could a prophecy truly be so absolute? Could fate be so cruel? She didn't know the answer. But a storm was brewing, a shift in the currents of the hidden world. Soon, the shadows she so carefully avoided would reach for her, and the prophecy that had defined her entire life would be put to the ultimate test. Her carefully constructed solitude was about to shatter, and she had no idea what would come next. A child's bright, unadulterated joy hit Elara first, a sudden splash of color in her otherwise muted world. She tried to filter it, to push it back, but it clung, warm and insistent. Just like them, she thought, a familiar ache settling in her chest. She watched the little girl, no older than 5, clutching a wooden doll, her laughter echoing the boundless happiness that Elara could only observe from a distance. Across the hidden market, a merchant's worry hummed like a low, discordant note, a fear of dwindling sales, of empty bellies. Farther off, a couple's quiet affection resonated, a soft, harmonious chord that Elara instinctively flinched from. It was too pure, too vulnerable. She moved through the bustling human enclave like a ghost, her presence barely a ripple. Her worn cloak, pulled tight, was as much a shield against the biting wind as it was against the overwhelming tide of human emotions. Every purchase was a calculated risk, every interaction a potential thread that could pull her into the fabric of their lives and ultimately lead to their sorrow. No matter how hard she tried, connection inevitably led to loss. That's why she always paid in cash, her movements swift and precise, leaving no digital breadcrumbs. She paused at a stall laden with fresh herbs, the earthy scent a welcome anchor. "Good evening, dear." The elderly vendor, her eyes crinkling at the corners, offered a warm smile. Elara felt a fleeting warmth, a grandmotherly concern, reach out, wrapping around her like a soft blanket. Her heart skipped. She almost leaned into it, almost returned the smile. But then the vision flashed, quick, brutal, unbidden. The vendor, alone, weeping, a deep, sorrowful emptiness. Elara's breath caught. Her hand trembled as she placed the coins on the counter, snatching her meager supplies. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely a whisper, already backing away, the warmth turning to a chill. The vendor's smile faltered, replaced by a puzzled frown, as Elara practically fled. She didn't know what scared her more, the prophecy or the undeniable pull of human connection it cursed. Soon after, Elara found herself darting down a narrow alleyway, the market's distant hum fading into the encroaching silence. The fear of being seen, of being known, was a constant companion. What followed was the metallic tang of blood, a smell that had haunted her dreams for years. The forgotten attic creaked under Elara's weight as she moved deeper into its dusty embrace. Moonlight, fractured by grimy panes, painted stripes across the peeling wallpaper. This was her sanctuary now, as temporary and fragile as every other. She settled cross-legged on a worn blanket, a wilting, potted fern before her. Still, the constant hum of the world's emotions throbbed behind her eyes. She closed them, focusing. Her internal monologue began, a quiet mantra to filter the noise, to find some semblance of peace. Push it back. Breathe. Just breathe. She stretched out a hand, warmth flowing from her fingertips, willing life into the drooping fronds. The plant slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to perk up. It was a small act, a defiance against the constant turmoil within. Suddenly, whispers filtered up from the floorboards below, human voices, hushed and laced with fear. "Another disappearance," a man muttered, his voice rough with anxiety. "And the animal attacks. They're getting closer." A woman's sob punctuated his words. "My cousin saw teeth." Elara froze, her empathic senses flaring, picking up the frantic pulse of their terror. Werewolves. They were talking about werewolves. She already knew of their secret world, a brutal hierarchy hidden just beneath the thin veneer of human society. She knew of their rivalries, their power. On the other hand, her hidden existence was becoming less and less tenable. The tension wasn't just a distant hum anymore. It was a tight knot in her gut. She was emotionally weary, constantly on edge, confirming her belief that the world was far too dangerous for her to engage with. It was always a matter of time before the supernatural shadows bled into her quiet corners. Because of that, her vigilance sharpened, her ears straining for more details. Maybe it was fate guiding her to this temporary spot, letting her overhear the escalating threat. She felt a wave of primal fear surge through her, overriding her practiced calm. Then, a sudden distant howl pierced the oppressive quiet, long and mournful, yet imbued with an unsettling power. It raised the hairs on Elara's arms, the sound vibrating through the old house, rattling the glass in the window. The wilting fern shuddered. She knew a storm was brewing. The howl had been a harbinger. News of increased werewolf patrols and brutal territorial skirmishes ripped through the human enclave like wildfire. Elara's sanctuary was compromised. Without warning, she was abruptly forced to abandon her temporary haven. Her movements were swift, practiced, a dance with desperation she knew all too well. She packed only the bare essentials: a worn blanket, a few dried rations, a tarnished silver locket that was her only link to a past she couldn't quite recall. The urgency now was a raw, clawing thing in her throat. She fled into the dense, shadowy forest that bordered the enclave. The air grew thick with the damp scent of ancient earth and decaying leaves. With every heartbeat, she pushed deeper, branches whipping at her face, roots tripping her hurried steps. But then, a chorus of snarls and the guttural thud of bodies hitting trees erupted just ahead. She froze, melting into the deeper shadows of a massive oak. Before she could move, Two aggressive werewolf patrols, snarling, tearing, and ripping at each other, crashed through the undergrowth. One was a tawny furred brute, teeth bared. The other, a sleek black wolf, its eyes burning with cold fury. Elara caught a glimpse of their sheer brutality, the raw, unrestrained power in their every move. Her heart skipped, terrified by their ferocity, confirming her deepest fears. This was the world they lived in, a world she barely touched, yet it threatened to consume her. As a result, she had to keep moving, her limbs aching, her lungs burning. She doubled back, desperate to avoid the brutal conflict, but the sounds of the battle were all around her, a terrifying symphony of violence. No matter how hard she tried to find a safe path, the forest seemed to twist against her, leading her deeper into the escalating chaos. She felt the surge of raw aggression from the warring factions, a dizzying mix of territorial rage and bloodlust that made her head swim. Lost and disoriented, she stumbled through the thick undergrowth, the world blurring into a kaleidoscope of green and brown. When her feet finally broke free of the clinging vines, she found herself in a small, moon-dappled clearing. Just like that, the sounds of the warring packs died away, replaced by an unnerving silence. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. Her instinct surged, screaming danger. Then, the ground beneath her trembled, not a tremor from distant fighting, but a profound vibration from something immense and close. An overwhelming, predatory aura descended, thick and suffocating, wrapping around her like an icy shroud. It smelled of ancient power, of untold centuries, and of something utterly, terrifyingly kingly. She looked up, her breath catching. The very air around her thickened, crackling with an unseen energy, signaling the arrival of something far more ancient and powerful than any rogue werewolf. The air crackled, thick and heavy, like static before a lightning strike. Elara's breath hitched shallow and ragged in her throat. Her senses, usually a jumbled mess of others' emotions, now locked onto a single, overwhelming presence that dwarfed everything around it. Fear, pure, distilled terror, surged through her, not just her own, but radiating from the trees, from the very earth beneath her feet. She didn't know what scared her more, the monstrous power, or the way it pulled at something deep inside her, a primal recognition. Suddenly, a guttural snarl ripped through the silence, vibrating through Elara's bones. A colossal, ancient wolf, its fur like midnight velvet, stepped into the moon-dappled clearing, its eyes burning gold fixed on Elara, consuming her. This wasn't just a beast. It was a king, radiating an almost suffocating power that brought the rogue wolves, previously so fierce, to a stunned, cowering halt at the edge of the clearing. Their bloodlust, which had chased her relentlessly, vanished, replaced by an even greater, unadulterated terror. This, Elara instinctively knew, was Ragnar. He didn't attack her. Instead, the Alpha King advanced, slow and deliberate, his golden gaze never leaving hers. Before she could move, his powerful form filled her vision. He lowered his massive head, a low, rumbling growl emanating from his chest, resonating not just in the air but through Elara's very soul. Then, without warning, his teeth, sharp and ancient, closed around her shoulder. Pain, searing and intense, exploded through her, but beneath it, something else bloomed. A cold fire, a burning brand that spread through her veins, claiming every cell. This was the ancient claiming ritual, brutal and absolute. He bit her and marked her as his mate. The act was shocking, violating, yet laced with an undeniable, binding power that rooted her to him, body and soul. Just like that, her world tilted. The rogue wolves, whimpering, turned and fled into the dark, leaving only Elara, Ragnar, and the silent, watching forest. Elara's mind reeled, a whirlwind of terror, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of being utterly possessed. Her immediate goal was simply to survive the searing pain, to comprehend what had just happened. Why would he claim her? He was a king, a beast of legend, and she was a ghost, a human destined for solitude. His piercing eyes fixed on her once more, a silent, unreadable command passing between them, pulling her deeper into his dangerous orbit. Despite her terror, she felt an inexplicable pull towards him, a foreign sense of inevitability, a terrifying new connection. As if pulled by a string, he then roughly yet protectively lifted her into his arms. His touch, though firm, wasn't entirely predatory. It felt fated. He moved with swift, silent purpose, carrying her away from the moonlit clearing, signaling her new, terrifying reality. Elara woke to the scent of aged stone and something rich, like polished wood and faint cedar. She opened her eyes to a ceiling vaulted impossibly high, adorned with intricate, unfamiliar carvings. Sunlight, softened by thick tapestries, spilled across a vast, opulent chamber. Silk sheets whispered against her skin. This was Ragnar's formidable fortress, the heart of the Shadowfang pack, and a stark, horrifying contrast to the damp attics and makeshift shelters she usually inhabited. It wasn't a prison of iron bars, but the luxurious confines felt even more suffocating. Deep down, she knew the truth. Her freedom was an illusion. Her empathic senses, dulled by the claiming, began to hum again, assaulting her with a cacophony of wolf emotions echoing through the ancient stone walls. Loyalty, sharp and fierce, from the Alpha's inner circle. Ambition, a gnawing hunger, from those seeking power. Resentment, a bitter, icy current flowed from particular corners aimed squarely at her. Lyra. Elara hadn't even seen her yet, but the powerful female beta's resentment was a palpable force, thick with possessiveness and jealousy, a silent scream of mine that resonated through the very air. Elara swung her legs over the side of the bed, her body still aching from the bite, the mark on her shoulder throbbing with a low, insistent hum. Her immediate goal was escape. She moved to the enormous windows, her fingers tracing the thick, carved frames. Locked. Magically sealed, perhaps, a subtle shimmering beneath her touch. She tried the heavy oak door, pushing, pulling, but it remained unyielding. Panic began to build, a cold knot in her stomach. As the silence stretched, broken only by her own ragged breaths, she realized the futility. She was truly trapped. Meanwhile, heavy footsteps approached the chamber, accompanied by a wave of suspicion and thinly veiled hostility. The door swung inward, revealing a group of Shadowfang wolves. Their expressions ranged from awe, mixed with suspicion, to outright hostility. Lyra, her frame lean and muscular, her dark eyes sharp and cold, stood at the forefront. A low growl rumbled in her throat, a clear challenge. "The human," Lyra hissed, her gaze raking over Elara, "is Ragnar's newest toy." How quaint. The word dripped with venom. Elara felt a profound sense of fear and powerlessness, combined with a defiant anger that boiled under her skin. Because of that, her jaw tightened. She wouldn't cower. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Ragnar's claim had stolen her freedom, but not her spirit. She took a shaky breath. "I'm Elara," she stated, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "And I'm not a toy." Lyra's eyes narrowed, a silent promise of future conflict. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with unspoken tension, a prelude to the storm that was sure to break. The air in the chamber grew heavy, charged with a predatory stillness. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The moment their eyes locked, Ragnar entered, his presence eclipsing everything else. He filled the doorway, a living force of nature, his broad shoulders seeming to brush the stone archway. His scent, wood smoke, ancient earth, and something undeniably wild, filled the room, overriding all other smells, commanding her senses. He was still in his human form, but the raw power of the Alpha King radiated from him, an almost visible aura that demanded subservience. "You will stay." Ragnar's voice was a low growl, more command than suggestion. It wasn't a question. He moved towards her, each step measured, deliberate. Elara felt the subtle shift in his emotions through their nascent bond, a possessiveness so absolute it bordered on terrifying. Her immediate goal had now shifted, not escape but to understand. Why was she here? She swallowed, forcing defiance past the knot in her throat. Why? Elara's voice, though quiet, was steady. Why me? What do you want? Ragnar stopped mere feet from her. His golden eyes, normally so cold, now held a flicker of something she couldn't decipher. Frustration, perhaps, or a deep, unreadable weariness. You are mine. That is enough. His words were blunt, unyielding. In that moment, Elara recognized a battle of wills. Her empathy reached out, testing, probing, and for a fleeting instant, she glimpsed a profound loneliness within him, a vast, echoing emptiness that surprised her. It was a crack in his formidable facade, a fleeting vulnerability. It's not enough for me, Elara retorted, her courage fueled by a spark of indignation that warred with her fear. I was living my life, alone, as I was meant to. She knew the words would provoke him, but she couldn't stop them. The prophecy, her life's burden, was being thrown into chaos by his inexplicable act. Her voice trembled, not from fear of him, but from the raw emotion churning inside her. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. As the silence roared between them, Ragnar reached out, his hand closing around her marked shoulder, the claiming bite throbbing beneath his touch. The intensity of his gaze pinned her, demanding her understanding, if not her full compliance. Escape, he stated, his voice now dangerously soft, is not possible. You are bound, Elara. He didn't need to explain further. The power thrumming through her veins, a direct link to his own, was proof enough. The harshness of his touch, the steel in his eyes, confirmed her forced acceptance. This was her new reality. Her heart ached. No matter how hard she tried to deny it, she was irrevocably tied to him. In the quiet that followed, Ragnar released her, his gaze sweeping over her one last time before he turned and left the chamber. But then, a faint, almost imperceptible shift in his usual coldness registered with Elara's empathy. It was a flicker of something she couldn't quite identify, a shadow of concern, a ghost of tenderness, leaving her even more bewildered about her captor. Her thoughts spun. She was no longer just a human trying to survive. She was claimed bound to an ancient king whose reasons remained shrouded in mystery. This inexplicable connection would haunt her until she found the answers she desperately sought. The fortress wasn't merely a structure of stone. It was a living, breathing entity, its pulse a constant thrum of power and ambition. Elara felt it, a low hum beneath her skin. After that terrifying confrontation with Ragnar, her initial fear morphed into a sharp, desperate need to understand her surroundings. Every hallway, every shadowed corner seemed to hold a watchful eye. The rigid hierarchy of the Shadowfang pack was palpable, a complex web of loyalty and simmering rivalry. She observed from the periphery, a silent shadow in a world of alphas and betas. She noted how the lower-ranking wolves moved with nervous deference, while the higher-ups carried themselves with an almost predatory confidence. Her empathic senses, usually a burden, became her shield. She could feel the currents, the steadfast loyalty of some, the gnawing hunger for power in others. Not only that, but the resentment aimed squarely at her was a constant, bitter taste in the back of her throat. Lyra, Ragnar's fierce beta, was a venomous whisper in every shared glance. Elara saw Lyra watching her during mealtimes in the grand hall, a possessive fury in her eyes. The human seems lost, Lyra purred, loud enough for Elara to hear, her words coded in saccharine malice. Perhaps she needs a leash. A few snickers followed, but most of the pack remained silent, their emotions a mixture of curiosity and a deep, ingrained fear of challenging their alpha's choice, however bewildering. Because of that, Elara kept her gaze steady, refusing to give Lyra the satisfaction of a reaction. She learned quickly, avoid eye contact with the openly hostile, offer a small neutral nod to the wary, and sense the genuine curiosity from the younger wolves. That's why Elara spent her days quietly exploring, not to escape, but to map the emotional terrain of her gilded cage. She found herself drawn to the quieter parts of the fortress, away from the loud, aggressive emotions of the training grounds. She saw a flicker of genuine affection from an older she-wolf tending to a litter of pups, a comforting warmth Elara hadn't felt in years. This was the start of her adaptation. She was learning to survive not just in this world, but within its intricate emotional landscape. In the stillness that followed, as the day waned and shadows lengthened, Elara witnessed something that momentarily fractured her perception of Ragnar. He stood by a courtyard wall, observing a young, clumsy wolf pup struggling with a basic training exercise. His expression, usually carved from granite, softened almost imperceptibly. A fleeting flicker of something akin to paternal concern, a deep tenderness, passed through their mate bond, then vanished just as quickly. It was a warmth, an unguarded emotion that deeply confused her. It was a contradiction to the ruthless king who had claimed her, a puzzle she couldn't solve. This brief, unexpected glimpse of humanity behind the alpha's mask haunted her, pulling her deeper into his mystery. Ragnar's training sessions with Elara were less about actual lessons and more about asserting his dominion. He would appear suddenly, demand her presence, and then put her through grueling walks across the vast fortress grounds or silent hours in his study, observing him. He expected her to follow, to adapt, to simply be. As a result, Elara often found herself exhausted, her legs aching, her mind reeling from the constant influx of his intense, primal emotions, dominance, ancient patience, and a relentless, powerful focus. Her immediate goal was always to comply enough to avoid his wrath, all while secretly trying to gather more information, to piece together the fragments of why she was here. During one such session, Ragnar was discussing pack patrols with his Gamma, a stoic warrior named Kyle. The conversation was terse, efficient. Suddenly, Kyle mentioned a recent ambush, detailing the loss of a young scout, a wolf Ragnar had seemingly taken under his wing. The space between them burned with Ragnar's unspoken grief, a raw, sharp pang that echoed through their mate bond. It was immense, ancient, and shockingly profound. It wasn't the fleeting concern she'd seen earlier. This was a deep-seated pain, a profound loneliness that pulsed from him, reaching out, and for a moment, completely overwhelmed Elara's own empathy. She gasped, a small, involuntary sound. Ragnar's head snapped towards her, his golden eyes narrowing, demanding an explanation for her sudden intake of breath. Elara clutched her head, the sudden influx of his ancient sorrow making her dizzy. She saw a vast, empty landscape in her mind, 1,000 years of solitude, of loss, of carrying burdens alone. This immense pain belied his fearsome reputation, shaking her perception of him to its core. Yet, before she could articulate what she felt, he reined his emotions in, the pain retreating behind a wall of cold, unyielding control. "What is it, human?" His voice was cold again, but Elara felt the tremor beneath it through their bond. She knew he felt her empathy just as she felt his grief. As the wind shifted, she straightened, her gaze locking with his. You carry so much," she whispered, the words slipping out unbidden. His expression hardened further, a clear warning, but Elara knew she hadn't imagined it. It was a fleeting crack in his formidable facade, a small success in chipping away at her initial fear and understanding the Alpha King who claimed her. From there, a new, unsettling question began to form in her mind. What other secrets lay hidden beneath his imposing exterior? Days bled into weeks within the fortress, each one a struggle between Elara's innate need for answers and her constant battle with the prophecy that echoed in her mind. That night, unable to sleep, she wandered through the labyrinthine corridors, drawn by an unseen pull. Her footsteps led her to a rarely used section of the fortress, a sprawling library filled with ancient scrolls and dusty tomes. The air here was heavy with the scent of old parchment and forgotten stories. She felt it, clear as day, a faint, lingering echo of deep wisdom. Her fingers ghosted over a collection of faded, leather-bound books. One, strangely unmarked, drew her eye. She pulled it from the shelf, its pages brittle with age. Inside, the script was faded, but discernible. Fragments of text leaped out at her. The empath's sacrifice. The lone one who defies, unless claimed by the ancient bond. Her breath hitched. As the truth unraveled, a chilling certainty settled in her bones. Her destined to die alone prophecy wasn't some random curse. It was part of something far older, far more intricate. It hinted at a darker side to her destiny, one tied to an ancient power, perhaps even Ragnar's claim. A surge of unease mixed with a desperate, burning need for more information consumed her. What did it all mean? Before the words left her lips in a silent gasp, a voice, sharp and laced with suspicion, cut through the quiet. Spying, little human? Lyra. She stood silhouetted in the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. The beta's presence was like a cold front, instantly chilling the air. Some secrets are best left undisturbed. Her gaze dropped to the ancient book in Elara's hands, a flicker of recognition, and something akin to fear in her eyes. That volume. It is forbidden. Lyra took a step forward, her intent clear. She didn't know what scared her more, Lyra's hostility or the chilling implications of the words she'd just read. Elara clutched the book tighter. What does this mean? She demanded, a tremor in her voice. Lyra's lips curled into a sneer. It means, she hissed, you are either a fool or a pawn. Either way, you are a weakness to be eliminated. Lyra lunged, her intent clear, not to harm, but to seize the book. Elara instinctively dodged, but the attack served its purpose. It reminded her just how precarious her position was, how many eyes watched her every move, and how deeply intertwined her individual fate was with the ancient, dangerous world she now inhabited. The encounter left Elara more determined than ever to understand the prophecy. Her isolation might have been less about protection and more about control, a control she was unknowingly fighting to reclaim. This revelation would soon push her and Ragnar onto a collision course with a truly formidable enemy. The fortress buzzed with a tense energy, thick with the scent of an approaching storm, not just outside, but within the pack. After that unsettling encounter with Lyra, Elara felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Ragnar's pack was on high alert, investigating a sudden surge of rogue werewolf attacks along their northern borders, skirmishes that felt too coordinated, too precise, to be random. Ragnar, restless and grim, had ordered Elara to accompany him to the command center, claiming it was for her education. She didn't know what scared her more, the escalating violence or the claustrophobic intimacy of being constantly at his side. He paced, a panther in human skin, his eyes scanning maps, his voice a low, commanding rumble as he issued orders. Elara watched him, her empathic senses picking up the immense pressure he carried, the burden of his pack's safety. With every heartbeat, she felt his strategic mind at work, his cold analysis and a fierce, unwavering protectiveness for his territory. An unexpected attack erupted at a distant outpost, forcing Ragnar to make a snap decision. He didn't hesitate, his orders sharp and decisive. Elara saw him not just as her captor, but as a king, a guardian. In the chaos of coordinating the defense, a rogue wolf managed to breach the inner perimeter. Before she could move, Ragnar reacted, a blur of speed and power, effortlessly subduing the intruder before it could even get near her. Because of that, a strange realization bloomed in Elara's chest. His protectiveness, once terrifying, now felt undeniably real, a raw, primal instinct that bypassed her fear. As the tension broke and the immediate threat subsided, they stood close, the air thick between them. "You're formidable," Elara murmured, the compliment slipping out unbidden. Ragnar's golden eyes met hers, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. Surprise? Approval? The space between them burned with an unspoken awareness, a sudden electric charge. His hand, calloused and strong, brushed hers as he turned to look at the map again, a spark of unexpected heat passing between them, leaving Elara breathless and rattled. It was brief, subtle, but undeniable. The fear was still there, but now, a confusing, nascent attraction had begun to coil in her gut. The uneasy truce between Elara's fear and her burgeoning curiosity about Ragnar shattered during an unexpected training exercise in the fortress's hidden cavern system. Ragnar, always pushing her limits, had taken her deep into the echoing tunnels, ostensibly to teach her evasion techniques. That's why they were alone. The oppressive silence broken only by their footsteps and the distant drip of water. Suddenly, a section of the tunnel collapsed, triggered by a minor earth tremor, trapping Ragnar beneath a massive rockfall. Elara felt a surge of raw, physical pain through their mate bond, so intense it brought her to her knees. Ragnar cried out, a sound not of a king, but of a wounded creature, vulnerable and in agony. His pain was immense, overwhelming her senses. He struggled, a deep, ancient rage simmering from him, a rage at his own helplessness, a frustration that was almost tangible. In that moment, a desperate impulse seized Elara. She reached out, not with her hands but with her mind, pouring her soothing empathic energy into him, trying to temper the agony. As her power flowed, the full force of their mate bond truly clicked. It wasn't just physical. It was soul-deep, ancient, a connection predating time. She saw glimpses, not memories, but echoes of his pain, his millennia of solitude, the ancient curse plaguing his lineage, a suffocating weight he had carried alone. She felt the true, overwhelming reason he had claimed her. As the truth unraveled, hitting her with the force of a physical blow, Elara gasped. The destined to die alone prophecy wasn't a curse of isolation. It was a condition. She was destined to die alone unless claimed by Ragnar, her true, fated mate. He hadn't trapped her. He had saved her, actively defying her doom. Simultaneously, a fragmented image flashed in her mind. An ancient, shimmering power. A key to breaking Ragnar's ancestral curse. A burden he revealed in a choked whisper through their bond. You are the key, little star. His voice, weak but resolute, echoed in her mind. Elara's fear transformed into a stunned, breathtaking realization. Her world tilted. This wasn't just about survival. It was about a profound, fated connection that actively defied her perceived doom. She felt a mix of awe and terror at the true weight of their bond and its potential. A destiny far grander and more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. The shared understanding of the prophecy's true meaning ignited a fierce, protective desire in Ragnar, and a reciprocal, powerful surge of connection in Elara, leaving them bound in a way neither fully comprehended. The game had changed. Ragnar, now free from the rockfall but still recovering, helped Elara from the cavern. The revelation of Elara's true prophetic role and the implication of Ragnar's curse finally having a possible end did not go unnoticed. By the time they returned to the main fortress, an unsettling quiet had descended. Then, without warning, the alarms shrieked. A coordinated, chillingly precise attack began, unlike any they had faced before. It wasn't a pack skirmish. It was a silent, insidious infiltration, magical and potent. Shadowy figures, not wolves but cloaked humanoids emanating a chilling aura of ancient magic, moved through the fortress's inner defenses. Elara's empathic senses screamed, assaulted by waves of cold, calculating malice. This wasn't simple aggression. It was pure, unadulterated evil. It was the work of a powerful, ancient enemy, the very force hinted at in Elara's fragmented research. The attack seemed specifically designed to separate Elara and Ragnar, to exploit the fragile, newly understood bond. or perhaps to capture Elara and prevent the prophecy's reinterpretation. A shadowy figure lunged at Elara, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Ragnar, despite his lingering pain, roared, transforming instantly, a massive black wolf filled with ancient fury. They fought together for the first time as true mates, their combined abilities proving formidable. Elara, no longer shrinking from her gifts, lashed out with her empathy, a defensive wave of confusion and terror washing over the attacking figures, momentarily disorienting them. She felt it, clear as day, her power amplifying Ragnar's, their bond a conduit for devastating force. Ragnar, a whirlwind of muscle and teeth, tore through their ranks, his growls shaking the very foundations of the fortress. What followed was a desperate, brutal dance of survival. They repelled the immediate assault, driving the intruders back into the night, but the cost was clear. Several loyal Shadowfang warriors lay wounded, their pain a fresh wave of grief in Elara's senses. As a result, the attack was a stark, terrifying message. Before the last shadowy figure vanished, it left behind a single ancient symbol carved into the stone of the courtyard. A symbol Elara faintly recognized from her cryptic texts, a sigil of the antagonist's purpose, to ensure the prophecy's original tragic interpretation came true, to destroy Ragnar and his lineage, and ultimately, to consume the power that Elara now represented. The threat was no longer abstract. It was a living, breathing entity intent on their destruction. This emergence of the true antagonist raised the stakes dramatically, moving the conflict from internal pack politics to an external, existential threat. It solidified Elara and Ragnar as a united front, facing a destiny far greater and more terrifying than either had imagined. The lingering scent of malevolent magic still clung to the ancient stones of the fortress, a chilling reminder of the enemy's reach. After that brutal attack, Ragnar moved with a renewed, grim purpose. His orders were sharper, his gaze more intense, focused solely on understanding the threat. Elara, no longer shrinking from his presence, stood by his side, her empathy now a sharpened tool, not a burden. She felt his profound determination, his absolute resolve to protect his pack. Her goal was clear: to help him, to uncover the full truth of the ancient enemy and their intertwined destinies. They spent intense, sleepless nights poring over ancient scrolls and fragmented texts from the fortress's deepest archives. Not only that, but Ragnar, once so closed off, revealed more of his own ancient knowledge, sharing snippets of his millennia-long existence, the whispers of forgotten prophecies, and the crushing weight of the ancestral curse that had silently plagued his lineage. Elara's empathy, now stronger and more focused, allowed her to connect with the echoes within the dusty pages, sensing hidden meanings, deciphering cryptic symbols that would have remained indecipherable to anyone else. It was a dance of minds, her intuition weaving with his vast experience. Because of that, they began to piece together the antagonist's motives, their ultimate aim to plunge the world into chaos by controlling Elara's power, or by ensuring her original lonely death. As a result, they discovered a critical detail: an ancient artifact, or a hidden location, was essential to the antagonist's ritual, a place mentioned only in the deepest, most obscured prophecies. It was a dangerous path, a direct confrontation with the enemy on their own ground. That's why they made a proactive decision, a calculated risk. They wouldn't just react, they would pursue, directly confronting the source of the evil. Ragnar's jaw, already granite, hardened further. "We move at dawn," he stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Elara felt a surge of fierce resolve, a burning conviction. Her fear was still there, a distant hum, but it was overshadowed by a powerful drive to fight for their future. The air thickened with the weight of their choice. Lyra, Ragnar's beta, appeared, her face etched with concern, but her usual animosity muted. "Alpha," she began. "This plan, it is reckless. To take the human—" Ragnar's golden eyes, usually so dismissive of dissent, held a flicker of something Elara recognized as a deep, ingrained trust in her abilities. She is not the human Lyra. She is Luna, and she is the key. He held Elara's gaze, a silent promise passing between them. Lyra, confronted with the undeniable proof of the ancient enemy's malice and Ragnar's unwavering conviction, reluctantly, almost imperceptibly, inclined her head. She didn't know what scared her more, the journey ahead or the profound shift in her own heart, fully committed to this dangerous path. The journey to the ancient artifact's rumored location was fraught with a tension that hummed beneath the forest's canopy. Elara and Ragnar moved as one, their senses intertwined through the mate bond, an almost physical tether. Elara's empathy stretched, feeling the nuances of the forest, the distant movements of creatures, and the subtle shift in the air that signaled unseen presences. With every heartbeat, she scanned, anticipating. Just as they neared a clearing bathed in an eerie silver light, a powerful magical trap sprung. Not a physical snare, but a psychic assault, designed specifically to sever their mate bond, to tear Elara from Ragnar's mind, to exploit her empathic abilities against her. Pain, sharp and searing, lanced through Elara's skull. Visions twisted her reality, memories of her lonely past, amplified, distorted. Destined to die alone, the words echoed, overlaid with whispers of Ragnar's betrayal, his coldness, his inherent danger. Her abilities, usually her strength, turned against her, amplifying the psychic noise, threatening to shatter her mind. She cried out, a guttural sound of agony. Through their bond, she felt Ragnar's furious roar, a primal wave of protective rage. He lunged, a blur of dark fur and fury, tearing at the unseen magical constructs, but the trap held him, binding him in shimmering energy. The space between them burned with the strain. Elara could feel the antagonist's presence behind the trap, a cold, ancient intelligence attempting to unravel her, to break the very connection that defined her newfound purpose. She felt it, clear as day, the deliberate targeting of their bond. Ragnar, seeing her agony, seeing her eyes glaze over from the psychic assault, unleashed his full, unrestrained ancient power. A surge of energy ripped through the clearing, shattering the very ground, a raw, devastating force unlike anything Elara had ever witnessed. It wasn't just physical strength, it was the power of his devotion, a terrifying, beautiful display of his love. His growl rose in his throat, a deep, vibrating sound that shattered the antagonist's mental grip on Elara, pulling her back from the brink of oblivion. They overcame the obstacle, the magical residue dissipating, leaving a smoking crater where the trap had been. But it left them both shaken, the mate bond throbbing, tested but undeniably stronger, forged in the crucible of direct magical conflict. As the echo faded, Elara looked at Ragnar, his chest heaving, his golden eyes blazing with untamed power and concern. The remnants of the trap or the defeated enemy left behind a faint, lingering scent, a specific kind of corrupted magic. It hinted at the antagonist's ultimate plan, a convergence, a dark ritual at a place of immense power and the terrifying possibility that they were already assembling everything they needed. The chilling revelation from the magical trap spurred Ragnar into immediate, decisive action. The antagonist wasn't just after Elara's power or his lineage, they aimed for a full-scale catastrophe, a global unleashing of the ancient evil Ragnar had hinted at. Because of that, Ragnar quickly received intelligence. A surprise attack was underway, not on the main fortress, but on a vulnerable outlying territory, a small ancestral village deep within Shadowfang lands. It was a diversion, a cruel test. Ragnar was forced to divide his forces, knowing he couldn't be in two places at once. His loyal beta, Kyle, was already there, but reinforcements were needed. "I must go," Ragnar snarled, his voice tight with fury, his gaze fixed on the map. "But if I leave the fortress unprotected, they will strike here." Elara felt his internal conflict, the agonizing choice between protecting his people and protecting his mate. Maybe it was fate that brought her here, Not just for Ragnar, but for his entire species. Her world tilted, and a new, fierce courage pushed through her old fears. "Send your warriors there," Elara said, her voice clear and firm. Ragnar's golden eyes snapped to her. "I will stay, and I will help." Kyle, who had entered the war room, scoffed. "A human protecting the Alpha's fortress? Lunacy." But Elara met his gaze, her empathy reaching out, not to manipulate, but to subtly connect with his deep-seated loyalty to Ragnar, his underlying fear for the pack. "I can sense them," she explained, her voice low. "Their intent, their numbers. I can guide the defenses." She laid out a daring plan, using her empathy to identify critical weaknesses in the antagonist's likely approach, suggesting specific strategic deployments. It was a sacrificial choice, putting herself at greater risk, but it would save Ragnar's pack and allow him to fight the diversion head-on. Ragnar studied her, a flicker of pride and concern in his eyes. As if fate demanded it, he nodded slowly. "She stays," he commanded, his decision absolute. He entrusted his fortress, his home, to her. Elara used her empathy to connect with the remaining forces, influencing a nervous Beta, inspiring a wary Gamma. She broadcast courage, determination, a belief in their combined strength. This act of unwavering loyalty and courage solidified her place within the pack, earning the grudging respect of even Lyra, who watched from the shadows, her resentment replaced by a stunned, reluctant awe. The decision made, Ragnar transformed, a magnificent, powerful wolf, and vanished into the night with his chosen warriors, leaving Elara to face the looming threat with the remaining, smaller force. The antagonist's full nefarious plan began to come into sharper focus, a ritual designed to unravel the very fabric of their world, a global catastrophe that Elara's true power was meant to prevent. The stage was set. The impending final confrontation was unavoidable and terrifyingly close. The night was a symphony of chaos. Elara, perched on the highest battlement of Ragnar's fortress, her senses strained, directed the remaining Shadowfang warriors. She pinpointed the antagonist's movements, their silent, insidious advance. Her empathy, usually a beacon, now felt like a raw nerve, screaming with the approaching malice. Because of that, her commands were sharp, precise, guiding the wolves to intercept the shadowy figures. Just when she believed they had held the line, a chilling ancient magic erupted from below, shaking the very foundations of the fortress. "Diversion!" Kale roared, his voice laced with desperation. Elara felt it. A shift in the magical current, a profound, sickening displacement. The true target wasn't the fortress's walls, but a hidden sacred nexus point deep beneath it, a wellspring of ancient power that sustained the Shadowfang lands. The antagonist hadn't sought to breach, they sought to cripple. Without warning, a wave of dark energy surged through the mate bond, not from Ragnar, but from the enemy, directly targeting the essence of their connection. It wasn't designed to sever, but to corrupt, to poison. Elara screamed, a silent cry swallowed by the roar of collapsing stone. The connection to Ragnar, usually a steady, warm hum, flickered, strained, then snapped into agonizing fragments. Her world tilted. A chilling, guttural, triumphant declaration echoed, not in her ears but directly in her mind. A cold, ancient voice. "You were destined to die alone, empath, and now he is taken from you. Alone. You will fall." In that moment, a terrifying realization slammed into her. The antagonist had succeeded in a significant part of their goal. Not only had they crippled the Nexus, but they had also unleashed a psychic assault that fractured the mate bond, rendering Ragnar, who was miles away fighting the diversion, gravely wounded, perhaps even incapacitated. Elara felt his essence, now distant, fading, like a star winking out in a vast, empty sky. Her goal was to save Ragnar, to reverse this catastrophic damage, but she was overwhelmed by shock and a profound sense of failure. Despair began to set in, amplified by the sudden, aching emptiness where Ragnar's presence should have been. This was a major blow, stripping her of her greatest external strength. The fortress lay silent, wounded. Smoke curled from shattered battlements, and the very ground seemed to weep. After that devastating blow, a chilling vacuum replaced the previous chaos. Elara rushed to the healers, her hands trembling, demanding news of Ragnar. The reports were grim. His life force, though not extinguished, was barely a flicker, consumed by the antagonist's dark magic. He was comatose, unresponsive. Lyra, her face a mask of grief and fury, openly challenged Elara in the command center. "This is your fault, human," she snarled, her voice raw with pain. "You brought this curse upon us. The Alpha is gone because of you." Other wolves, their fear and despair palpable, echoed the sentiment. Elara's authority, so recently earned, crumbled. She was isolated, not just physically, but emotionally. With every heartbeat, she felt the weight of their resentment, their blame, crushing her spirit. She tried to heal Ragnar with her empathy, to rekindle the faint spark of life she sensed. She poured all of herself into their fractured bond, but it was like trying to fill a sieve. Nothing held. Everything seemed futile. No matter how hard she tried, the words of the prophecy hammered in her mind. Destined to die alone. It wasn't just a fear anymore. It was a crushing reality. She closed her eyes, and visions of her isolated past flooded her. A child shrinking from friendly touches, a teenager pulling away from nascent friendships, always fearing the inevitable loss, always believing her presence brought sorrow. Her mind replayed all the reasons she had embraced solitude, all the painful confirmations that connection led only to heartbreak. She felt it, clear as day, the terrifying confirmation of her lifelong burden. Every attempt she made, every desperate plea, seemed to deepen her despair. Elara stood over Ragnar's seemingly lifeless form, the mate bond between them fading to a terrifying whisper, a fragile thread on the verge of snapping. The fortress, once a symbol of immense power, felt empty, silent, amplifying her crushing solitude. The core of her deepest fear had materialized. She was truly alone, and her desperate attempt to defy fate had only brought ruin to the man who had claimed her, the man who was supposed to be her destiny. Elara retreated, not to a hidden attic or an abandoned cabin, but to the deepest, most forgotten corner of her own mind. She curled inward, the physical world blurring into an indistinct haze. She had no goal, no purpose left, only the raw, throbbing agony of her loss. In the quiet that followed, the fortress was a tomb, its silence a crushing weight. She confronted the terrifying reality. Perhaps the original prophecy was true. Perhaps she was a curse, not a key. Her attempt to defy it had not only led to Ragnar's downfall, but also to the near doom of his entire species. Deep down, she knew the truth. The guilt was a living thing, clawing at her insides. Her presence, her power, her very existence had brought this catastrophe. She replayed Ragnar's cold dominance, his initial possessiveness, convincing herself that his claim was never truly about a fated bond, but a desperate act, a tool for survival. And now, she had proven to be a faulty one. She was truly a catalyst for destruction. This was her dark night of the soul, a moment of pure, unadulterated despair where all hope had finally flickered out. She felt utter despair, resignation, a profound sense of tragic solitude that mirrored the desolate loneliness she'd sensed in Ragnar. She had failed everyone, including herself. She lay curled on the cold floor of her chamber, tears of forgotten sensation, her body numb. The mate bond, that powerful, undeniable connection, was barely a thread now, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth in the vast, cold emptiness. It was Ragnar's lifeline, a spark that refused to die, a tiny beacon in the overwhelming darkness. But Elara was too lost in her own abyss to fully register it. She had embraced her prophecy, the destined to die alone curse, with an awful, final acceptance. There was nothing left to fight for, nothing left to lose. The silence roared, amplifying her defeat. As the echo faded and the darkness seemed absolute, a single, tiny pulse, like a dying ember, stirred within the fragmented bond. It was Ragnar, still fighting, still there. His indomitable will, even in unconsciousness, reached out, a lifeline. Elara's soul, battered and broken, felt it. And just like that, everything changed. The cold stone floor pressed against Elara's cheek, but she barely felt it. Her focus narrowed, honed on that single fragile spark within the mate bond. It was Ragnar's essence, a whisper of his indomitable will, even in unconsciousness. She poured her own fading energy into it, desperate to reach him. As the bond pulsed, a sudden, blinding vision erupted in her mind, not a memory of the past, but a projection, vivid and terrifying, of a possible future. She saw Ragnar, alive, but trapped in an endless void, his power slowly draining, his golden eyes filled with an ancient, unbearable sorrow. He was reaching for her, a silent plea. But he could only be saved if Elara fully embraced her empathic power, not just to soothe or sense, but to heal, to connect on a scale she never dared, to empower. The vision was brutal, yet it ignited a fire in her belly. Because of that, her despair transformed into a fierce, desperate determination. Her empathy, which she had always seen as a vulnerability, was the very key. It was the weapon, the shield, the lifeline. She felt it, clear as day, her true purpose. Not to die alone, but to live connected, to fight for that connection. Just as the vision faded, a shadow fell over her. Lyra. The beta stood there, her face grim, but her eyes held a flicker of something Elara hadn't seen before. Grudging respect. "He lives," Lyra rasped, her voice rough with a pain Elara now understood. "But barely. The Nexus, it drains him. We need to act." Lyra, who had openly scorned Elara, was now offering a lifeline, a vital piece of information. "There's an ancient ritual, a way to siphon the Nexus's power, to heal him. But it requires an empath of immense strength, a true empath." Elara pushed herself up, her limbs shaking, but her resolve hardening. As a result, her fear of her own power, her lifelong misbelief that her empathy brought only sorrow, finally shattered. It was a gift, a weapon, a lifeline. She didn't know what scared her more, the impossible task ahead or the exhilarating surge of power that now coursed through her veins. She looked at Lyra, a silent understanding passing between them. "Tell me," Elara commanded, her voice no longer trembling, but steady and resonant. "Tell me everything." This was the turning point, the climb back from the abyss. With newfound resolve, Elara approached Ragnar's seemingly lifeless form, preparing to use her empathic power in a risky, unprecedented way. The air in Ragnar's chamber thrummed with Elara's focused energy. She knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his chest, the mate bond a fragile, shimmering thread between them. After that revelation, her goal was singular: to heal him, to pull him back from the brink. She closed her eyes, channeling her empathy, not just into his physical wounds, but into the very core of his being, addressing the ancient loneliness and the curse that had plagued his lineage. She pushed against the dark magic that clung to him, a relentless burning force. With every heartbeat, she poured her strength into him, a silent song of love and defiance. Slowly, agonizingly, the fragmented bond began to mend. A faint warmth spread from Ragnar, a flicker of his consciousness. In the quiet that followed, a voice, weak but undeniably his, echoed in her mind through their bond. "Elara, little star." Tears pricked her eyes. He was there. He was fighting. Together, even in his weakened state, they formulated a daring final plan. Ragnar, through their bond, provided ancient knowledge of the Nexus, of its vulnerabilities, and of the antagonist's true ritual. Elara, with her heightened empathy, understood how her power could disrupt it, how she could become the conduit for a counter-ritual, a weapon of light against their darkness. Meanwhile, the Shadowfang pack remained scattered, demoralized, their spirits crushed by Ragnar's incapacitation and Lyra's open descent. Elara knew she couldn't face the ancient enemy alone. She felt it, clear as day, the need for unity. She sought out the pack leaders, those who had doubted her, those who had resented her. She didn't demand loyalty. She offered hope. She shared glimpses of Ragnar's enduring spirit, of his fight, using her empathy to subtly influence their despair, reinstilling courage and unity. She spoke of the true prophecy, of the ancient enemy's manipulation, of a future where they could defy fate. Not only that, but she showed them the strength of her bond with Ragnar, a tangible proof of their combined power. As a result, the pack began to stir, a low rumble of renewed purpose replacing the silence of defeat. Lyra, her eyes now filled with fierce loyalty, stood by Elara's side, a silent testament to Elara's influence. Elara, once a fearful, isolated human, now stood as a leader, a beacon of hope. Ragnar, through their bond, gave her a single, powerful command. Go. Claim our destiny. His voice, though still faint, resonated with absolute conviction. The plan was set. The pack was united. The dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, a stark reflection of the grim determination that now pulsed through the Shadowfang ranks. After that moment of unity, Elara, cloaked in a new mantle of quiet power, led the loyal Shadowfang forces. Kyle, his face grim but resolute, marched at her side, followed by Lyra, her presence a silent challenge to any lingering doubt. The journey to the antagonist's stronghold was fraught with tension, the air thick with anticipation. With every step he took, Elara felt Ragnar's presence, a steady, unwavering pulse within their bond, a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. He was still weak, but his spirit was a burning ember, fueling her own. Elara's empathy, now fully embraced, became her eyes and ears. She anticipated ambushes, sensing the malevolent intent of the enemy's sentinels before they even moved. "Left flank! Hidden archers!" she would call out, her voice clear and strong, guiding the warriors through treacherous terrain. Her strategic use of her empathy was a revelation, turning potential skirmishes into swift, decisive victories. This was her power, unleashed. She didn't just feel emotions, she understood intentions, vulnerabilities, and the very fabric of the enemy's dark magic. As the sky darkened and they neared the antagonist's stronghold, a towering structure of jagged, obsidian-like stone, the air grew thick with malevolent magic. It seeped from the very ground, a chilling, corrupting force that made the wolves snarl and Elara's skin prickle. She felt the antagonist's power swelling, a dark, ancient entity preparing for its final ritual. She felt it, clear as day, the immense, terrifying power they wielded, a force capable of unraveling the world. The weight of the world, of Ragnar's life, of the entire werewolf species, rested on her shoulders. But now, it wasn't a crushing burden. It was a sacred trust. As the bond pulsed, Elara looked up at the looming stronghold, her heart pounding not with fear, but with fierce anticipation and unwavering resolve. She was no longer the isolated human, destined to die alone. She was Elara, Luna of the Shadowfangs, mate to the Alpha King, and she was ready to fight for her destiny, for their future, and for the love that had defied fate itself. The final, fated confrontation was imminent, a clash that would decide the fate of their world. The ground vibrated with the enemy's ritualistic chants as Elara led the charge. The Shadowfang warriors, united and fierce, surged forward. Inside the stronghold, the ancient antagonist, a cloaked figure radiating pure malice, stood over a swirling vortex of dark energy, the nexus point. They turned, their voice a chilling hiss that echoed in Elara's mind. "You cannot defy fate, empath. Alone you are born. Alone you will die." They launched a devastating psychic attack, aiming to shatter Elara's spirit and sever her bond with Ragnar once and for all. Visions of her lonely childhood, of Ragnar's fading life force, assaulted her, twisting her reality. But Elara was no longer the girl who shrank from connection. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she embraced her empathy, using it not just to defend, but to attack. She pushed back against the antagonist's manipulation, a wave of pure empathic force that disrupted their dark magic, exposing their lies for what they were. She saw the truth of their millennia-long deception, their fear of her true power, of a fated bond that could unravel their control. With every heartbeat, Elara wielded her empathy like a weapon, shielding her allies, projecting courage, and sending searing waves of mental feedback at the antagonist. Miles away, Ragnar felt it, a surge of power, a defiant roar through their mate bond. He was still weak, still battling the remnants of the dark magic that clung to him, but fueled by Elara's unwavering strength and the profound depth of their connection, he began to push back. He provided crucial, raw power, a lifeline that surged through their shared bond, enabling Elara to deliver the final shattering blow. As the sky darkened, a blinding light erupted from Elara, a pure, concentrated burst of empathic energy amplified by Ragnar's ancient strength. It struck the antagonist, ripping through their defenses, shattering their ritual, and causing the dark vortex to implode. The prophecy of destined to die alone was not just defied, it was rewritten, transformed by their combined force. The antagonist screamed, a sound of pure agony, before crumbling into dust, their influence dissolving into nothingness. Ragnar, now free from his curse, let out a triumphant roar that echoed across the lands, his full strength returning, and their bond surged with a palpable, overwhelming joy. The world felt cleaner. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of relief and raw emotion. The remaining Shadowfang warriors, exhausted but victorious, let out cheers that shook the stronghold's foundations. Ragnar, his form radiating immense strength and an unexpected warmth, appeared in the main courtyard, his golden eyes blazing with renewed vigor. He gathered his pack, his voice a low, rumbling reassurance that settled their frayed nerves. The warriors looked upon Elara with awe, their previous suspicions replaced by profound respect. Because of that, the long-standing tensions within the pack began to dissipate, like mist burning off in the morning sun. Lyra, her face streaked with dust and sweat, approached Elara, her usual snarl replaced by a solemn nod. "Luna," she stated, the word carrying a weight of acceptance and acknowledgement Elara had never expected. "You saved us. You saved him." It wasn't a grudging concession. It was a humble acknowledgement of Elara's power and her rightful place by Ragnar's side. Elara felt Lyra's raw admiration, a surprising warmth that settled in her heart. Together, they began to assess the damage caused by the ancient enemy. The nexus point now stable but weakened. The wounded were tended to, the dead mourned. In the stillness that followed, a sense of hope, a shared future, began to permeate the air. The pack was wounded, but unbroken. Their spirits, once heavy with the shadow of ancient manipulation, now soared with a new freedom. Ragnar approached Elara, his gaze softening, his hand reaching out. His touch was no longer the firm grasp of a captor, but the comforting, possessive embrace of a mate deeply intertwined. He drew her close, his lips finding her forehead, a silent promise of endless tomorrows. The weight she had carried for so long, the burden of the prophecy, finally lifted. Months later, the Shadowfang fortress, once a symbol of cold ancient power, now vibrated with life and warmth. It hummed with renewed purpose. Elara and Ragnar stood together on the highest battlements, not just Alpha King and Luna, but true partners, their bond a shimmering, undeniable force. The Shadowfang pack thrived under their combined leadership, a beacon of unity and strength in the werewolf world. She didn't know what scared her more, the memory of her past isolation or the boundless joy of her present. Elara no longer isolated herself. Her empathic abilities, once a source of fear and loneliness, were fully embraced. She used them to foster understanding and peace within the pack, sensing disputes before they flared, bridging gaps between wolves and subtly influencing alliances with other packs. Ragnar, still the formidable Alpha King, now carried a lightness about him, his ancient loneliness finally eased. He found genuine joy in Elara's company, their shared laughter echoing through the halls. Their love was palpable, a testament to their journey, to how they had defied the cruel hand of fate. He would often watch her, his golden eyes filled with a tenderness that still made her heart ache with happiness. As a result, the prophecy of destined to die alone was not just defeated. It was transformed into a testament of their unbreakable bond. Elara, once convinced she was cursed, had found her purpose, her power, and a future entwined with the Alpha King. She had chosen connection, and it had saved not just her, but an entire species. They often spoke of the past, of the lessons learned, of the fragility of fate in the face of love. The final image is of Elara leaning into Ragnar's strong embrace, his arm wrapped around her, his chin resting on her head. They looked out over their thriving territory, the moon, bright and full, shining down on them. Their bond, illuminated by the night sky, was unbreakable, a powerful symbol that love could conquer even the most daunting of fates, proving that sometimes the greatest prophecies are not found in ancient texts, but forged in the hearts of those brave enough to defy them.